right. So I was previously talking about some stuff, going over some ideas, and I thought, well, maybe I'll try to record it. I don't know. It kind of switches gears when I start recording because I'm not quite on a tangent in terms of going over notes or ideas. I haven't kept up with all of these various things going on with the details of, say, like Iran and Gaza. And I had committed so much time just really trying to keep up with all these things, fragmenting in all these different directions. And so I just haven't been up to speed with all of it. I'm noticing some people packaging. So here's the thing. Years back, I had studied a lot of what Sam Harris was doing because he was kind of the front runner to, like 15 years ago, to this movement that was becoming the secular atheist movement, globalized and hugely influential on navigating the conversation between religion, atheism, and Western civilization, preservation of the modern world, and basically like the end of religion. He and Richard Dawkins and various ones were being labeled as he and three others were the four horsemen of the apocalypse. It was like a cheeky term to basically reference them as being the powerful figures to end the world's religious influence and usher in this like new secular free world. Long story short, a lot of people got really directly involved in studying them. I had dedicated a huge portion of my life. Life kind of situated me into... I kind of like dropped me right in the middle of this. It's a long story. I hadn't really planned to go into like atheist analysis and stuff like that. So anyway, that's a huge aspect of those way years back where then I ended up spending several years becoming familiar with their content online, watching hours and hours and hours of their debates among various religious groups, whether it be Judaism, Islam, Christianity, Buddhism, etc. And it seemed somewhat, it was like he seemed somewhat friendly to the option of bringing in other opponents and people to have discussion. But I could kind of gauge that he ultimately felt like his argument would still kind of supersede anyone else's. So he can somewhat entertain some of it. He was categorized as being unflinchingly, absolutely opposed to Islam. Even now, years later, I could see some of his videos have kind of been tempered a little bit, and he is more open to saying and speaking as though he's open to discussions with moderate Muslims, but it took years where he actually wasn't open to that. Eventually, he came out and said after certain types of social pressure on it, because initially he and various other atheists were using their platform to kind of provoke unrest among and kind of target various Muslims, and basically having, even at that time with the Charlie Hebdo case, a lot of he and his platform supported people coming out in the streets and having an end to Islam and an end to the veil, all of these things, all the stuff that now you kind of see associated with Christ as King. And it really festered years back, which was interesting because it seemed like he kind of sowed seeds of saying he could see similar arguments and good company with like some of the Christian groups and pinning them in this animosity against Islam. I didn't see it that way, and I resisted it for years and reached out to, even felt like life kind of situated me into helping navigate things within Islam. And anyway, there's a lot to say there. I then would actively critique Sam Harris, even though he'd kind of have a friendly posture to me, seeming like, oh, you're not a threat, you're not Muslim or whatever. But then I would argue for the case of like Islam. That was maybe his assumption. I don't necessarily really categorize myself. It's a long story in terms of understanding how I interpret religion and spirituality and the practices. Even so, though, I was advocating for discussions among Islamic groups and whatnot. He and other groups and other secular groups would recruit what they would call like ex-Muslims and women to band together and produce this like women's rights campaign, which he hugely supported and platformed and helped give like a ideology for. I'm not saying though that among the world and these pressures and this massive westernized system backed by massive types of control measure capitalistic, I guess you would say like monitoring over world occurrences. I'm not saying that it doesn't provoke other groups on a lesser scale to react or respond, or to respond more blatantly and not as covertly, because the control measure world system, capitalistic, crony capitalism, however you want to say it, works a little bit more stealth mode, because they have to also preserve a type of frontline appearance of things and propaganda. And so they have a lot more covert methods, which over the years people had suspected, but then had started to come out in the open. Whereas the groups that they power over don't always caretake as much for propaganda. They end up being reaction. They're reacting to the system, and they're not caretaking for the propaganda. It's more out in the open. And so it's easy for other groups to say, see, they're acting this way and they're doing these things, and hiding what's actually provoking various ones, which is all the behind the scenes stuff that's actually setting the standard for world leaders and people to behave and respond this way. It's like a legitimate response to an incorrect world system standard. And so then they would go and they would recruit all these people in these movements, and they would package it as these women rights movements, and they would target Islam. And then eventually they were saying, we don't have to worry about Christianity because it's basically in line with our system, and it'll just kind of dissolve, because ultimately none of their power that they're using is through anything distinct of Christianity. It's aligned with the secular Western system. And we're using them to put pressure on Islam. And so seeing this develop over all of these years, I've just been trying to be a part of preserving the core of what religion really is, and trying to pull people back from this set in motion being pinned against each other. And so, yeah, I mean, I think I kind of quickly said what I was going to say. Yes, people can find the evidence of saying, well, world leaders are doing this and this and this, but almost every time, every testimony of these world leaders says, well, the U.S. aligned powerful system, the westernized system, and the capitalistic approach undermines us economically, keeps us under the control of it, has covert methods to go around us and usurp what we're actually about, forces us into an attempted conversion onto that system without really going through the stages of proper negotiation and synthesizing and mutuality. And then they come in when there's like a frustration about it. They try to come in and force our women out from under us to have these movements, to participate with various ones, in the guise of recruiting people for this type of freedom under this form of capitalistic gain, and then pulling us all out from under it. And then it enhances and it inflames tensions, and then people play to that. And then the propaganda tool will come in and pin people against each other internally to make sure that they channel the angst against the populations, and control it by picking and choosing forms of access or spokespeople or things along those lines. It's not always so much that every single little thing is under some type of control measure, as much as there's certain points of reference that sow seeds for gearing propaganda. And then it just sets in motion the societal perception. And so you'll find different leaders and different ones becoming, unknowingly just becoming extensions of the way that it becomes framed, the suggestive measures by which it becomes framed. So, I mean, in some sense, it could also be likened to having an ability to see what people's tendencies are, and using the worst forms of their already present tendencies or unresolved tendencies to pin and direct and channel toward other people. And in that, people then fall for it. They become extensions of it without even always knowing it. And so, anyway, that would go into a lot of other aspects too. But on another basic level, though, it isn't just people. Like we are finding there are massive amounts of money investment that go into simply the continual framing of how the system functions and selects for and puts out information, which then just kind of feeds into those different roles that maintain the framing of the system. I'm going to leave it at that for now.